Right.
Early, well attended.
As they always are.
Right, yeah.
That was my question, why, we
Right,
haven't did
right.
one.
Yeah, so this one's first one, which you did recently, also for the micro enterprise program, where you've had a public hearing just to inform people of the intention of your desires to submit an application. Which, so you did that, I can give you an update, that's also on the agenda. So on that micro enterprise program, after immediately following the public hearing, we submitted on the county's behalf a preliminary application to the State Office of Community Renewal. We have since received an invitation to actually apply. So we're working on that and filling out all those paperwork and that documentation. Hopefully, we'll get the full application in the next week or two and hear about funding as soon as we do. Regardless of getting the funding or not, one of the big components of the micro enterprise program is to hold an entrepreneurial training class. So we're actually going to hold it regardless of the funding. It actually kicks off. It's a 4-week training program starting on September 26th. We're going to start marketing that. It begins with laying the groundwork, looking at legal considerations if you're going to start a business. Then we talk about bookkeeping, marketing, and then the basics of writing a business plan and doing financial projections.
So who would apply, the people that are gonna apply for grants down the road?
Yes,
That's
so
anybody.
we're gonna hold this regardless. Whoever is thinking about opening a business, send
Could just be
anybody that's
informative
left.
if you don't fill in if you don't look for a grant, right?
Yes, so
I can see that.
if there's anybody who takes this class will be eligible and successfully completes this program, attends all 4 sessions, will be eligible to apply for the micro enterprise program in the funding, which is up to $25,000 of a grant for inventory, working capital, whatever it may be. So this is sort of the first port.
And they have to take the training?
They have to take the training, the 4 weeks.
Yeah, okay.
And the eligibility is somewhat restricted.
Yeah, so the intention of the Black Grant program is to create jobs. So if there is an entrepreneur who's looking at starting up, if they meet the low to moderate income criteria for Columbia County, they're automatically eligible, which if it's a 2-person household, it's $60,100 is the income limit. Or if they create a job as a result of the program, that makes them eligible.
Is there a requirement that they have less than a certain number of employees? Or is that
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that's a good one. Thank you for that. Great question. To be eligible, you have to have 5 or fewer employees. So if it's a startup, you meet the definition. But as long as they have 5 or fewer, including the owner, they're eligible.
I think the good news is that even if people inquire about it, we have other programs that we can refer them to, including the Columbia Forward Loan Program and our own SBA and county loan fund.
Turn up the interest.
Exactly what we're doing. So
Just-
if
If you can sign that form so I don't forget, because I'll forget. Thank you.
That's just for reporting, no resolution for that, right? No.
No.
Thank you.
So jumping back to broadband, the federal government awarded $640 million to New York State. We had a webinar last weekend, I think Wednesday or Thursday, from the state broadband office. They're now talking about the fact that they have to go back and review all of the addresses. And then they have to look at what the FCC said were addresses. And then they're going to come up with a plan that they submit back to the FCC for approval. And so it's going to be mid 24 before you'll see funding. However,
I might lose funding between now and then.
yeah. So we have talked to the broadband office because they do feel that we are further ahead than most counties in the state in terms of knowing our unserved addresses, which because of the fact that we're going to get 350 plus from the money that Representative Delgado was awarded. And that seems to be moving forward, certainly again in Austerlitz, who used their own ARPA money to fulfill the need. But in Canaan and New Lebanon, we've had some very positive calls with the USDA in terms of moving forward with the addresses. I think we're gonna try to pick up some in Austerlitz that were missed and perhaps in Ghent as well. We're gonna thank you, Supervisor, for your continued support because this grant is in the name of the town of Ghent. And in order to get the money, because that's how it's appropriated, your participation and involvement is critical. We think we're down between 500 and 600 addresses countywide. After that, over 200 are in Hillsdale.
Well, yeah.
And so we're meeting with them tomorrow for a half an hour because I said to them, if we're going to be a test case for you, we have 4 providers. You'll get a sense of what a competition would be like because several of them are on the peripheral of each other. And we would also have an opportunity to get real pricing. And up until now, it's hard to get real pricing if you don't have the money because the providers put a contingency of 20% in because they don't know if their costs will go up or whether
And then you're trying to figure out the rules.
how the rules go. The other side of this is if each for the 4 providers do 5 a week, and there's 52 weeks in a year, you're going to be continuing to reduce that list.
Right.
And rather than us go out and spend more money trying to go door to door to get the list more accurate, my thought was if you did an RFP, you would know 2 things. One, who's interested in what addresses that are remaining, and the providers know better than anyone which ones are remaining because they're hooking them up as part of how they'll continue to generate revenue. But we're also going to find the 50 or 100 addresses no one wants out of those 500 because they're $10,000 or $20,000 a hookup. So I wrote the state and played Columbo, saying they really didn't know what to do here. Should we do our own RFP? Or do you want us to wait until you do one? Because I took the quote from the governor's press release that they were going to do one. And they said, we really appreciate you coming to us and not just going off, doing it without consulting with us. We'd like you to do one, but we want to tell you how we want it done, which is fine with me. It's your money. As you know, I don't think it's not something that we've discussed broadly, but there still is a partial allocation of funding for broadband in the county's ARPA money. It was reduced, but at the same time, it's not sufficient to, in any way, to complete the build out of the county. With 500 or 600 addresses, I'm looking. I think it's going to be $1.8 million to $2 million, which is about $4,000 a hookup. It averages out about 3,000 when you talk to the 4 providers. We've had phenomenal support and engagement from the 4 providers, and we have not had. I think we're waiting for Archtop and GTEL to finish their transaction to get more involved with Archtop. But we're making progress.
Meet with Tim and I, we haven't met with him yet, but.
Yeah, but I left a message over a week ago.
Okay.
That he never followed.
Yeah, I know, yeah, they come and go sometimes.
So, but someone said they were trying to get approvals to lay the core fiber from Germantown across the county. But again, the state understands in our earlier conversations that in a county like Columbia, it's not about overbuilding to create competition. It's about getting the donut holes filled,
Right.
And getting people access to the program who can't afford it, because there is significant money available for people to buy down the cost of the service, and move on. Any questions?
How many addresses in Columbia County?
But I'm saying 500 to 600 because I'd rather err on the larger size than say 400, which I really think it is, and have them, have them say that I missed some, because every time we do the list,
I know.
someone's off 10%. But we did have good news. Mid Hudson that indicated they were moving up to complete the build out of Stockport.
Yeah. And they've talked to me about coming into Stuyvesant. They're just trying to get a commitment from, Spectrum if they don't want to go to that southern corner. And I will say too, over the weekend, I did find a guy out measuring poles and wires, actually walking measuring every one of them and documenting, and said he was doing work for Spectrum to see about running fiber there. And I think this goes along, the mobile home park has been trying to get power. So the National Grid planners have been through, and they tell me they have to replace all the poles in order to bring some phase to that site. And maybe they're looking at that as an opportunity to change this at the same time. I'm not sure, but whatever.
So, it's been a 8-10 year process, but, it is continuing to whittle down. On solar, I'd hope to have more information. We're doing a survey. Every time we get another county's plan on how to deal with the 5 megawatt solar projects, where they're entitled to the exemption, unless the individual municipality after a 60-day notice says we want to pilot. They're otherwise tax exempt unless the community steps up. And over the last several years, we've stepped up on behalf of the county and then called the other 2 jurisdictions to be sure that they wanted to go along. But we've seen we're at approximately $3,500 a megawatt. Somewhere 3,000 that got in early. We're seeing 5,500. We're seeing 8,500 in Greene County. I'm seeing 10,000 in Oneida County. Again, on a 5 megawatt project, the difference between $15,000 and $50,000 divided 3 ways is still real money. So I think we're going to propose an increase, but I do want to. Jessica and I were talking about it after we reviewed some of these documents the last week, and I'm thinking somewhere between 5,000 and 7,500, and maybe level off at 6,000. So you're not at a point where you're saying we're trying to be give you a penalty, and they are only available. This would only be available for the 5 megawatt projects. We are fully cognizant and appreciative of the fact that the full board unanimously voted to instruct the IDA to do nothing to support the Hecate project unless the town of Copake asks the IDA to consider it. So we're not looking at big solar. We're looking at the almost as of right type of solar project. So we will get something that can be recommended. I don't know. I have to talk with Rob Fitzsimmons. I suppose the county could pass a policy, and then we could ask the school districts and the towns to do it. The one issue I did bring up before is we have been splitting the funds 50% to the school districts and 25% to the town and the county. And in other places, they are splitting it based on the proportionate percentage of tax. That leaves the town with virtually nothing, because the county tax in most instances, in most towns, most situations in the county is a higher percentage of the aggregate tax number than the town is. Yeah. And so that, but the situation arose where someone offered them it based on the percentage, and the school district said, we can't give back.
Right.
We can't, if we're going to get 68%, why would we take 50?
Right.
Yep.
So, moving on, to affordable housing, just do you want to give an update, please?
Yeah, our next full meeting of the Complete Housing Task Force will be Wednesday night. It's going to be 4 o'clock. It's a hybrid meeting at the CEDC office and also on Zoom. Some of the things we've been talking about lately are an employer survey that will be going out to the entire county. This was created by Dr. Tim Wilmot over at the Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation. That's been reviewed by the task force. Jessica's taking a look at it. Chris Nardone in Greene County is taking a look at it. He's on the advisory board of the Housing Task Force as well. So all of our input has been forwarded to the doctor. He'll put together a final version of that, and then we'll distribute that through our office to the various employers throughout the county. Once we get the results back for that, which will hopefully be about a 4-week period. In the meantime, we're also working up an employee survey to follow on the backs of that. So we'll actually speak to the people that work in the county and may or may not live in the county currently. So that'll be the next collection of data that we receive. We've been talking on the policy side. We've been talking about the potential of the uses of New York State Land Bank. These are nonprofits / public authorities. Every time I see Darren Scott from the Office of Homes and Community Renewal, he says, I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell every community. If you don't have a land bank yet, get one. There are a number of these you can have throughout the state, and we're starting to approach the limit. So we've been talking internally about what's the best way that we could form one of these in the county. What would that look like? One of the other things, we're really taking a harder look at this today in the office because this has kind of a longer tail to it. CDBG offers both home repair and manufactured home replacement grant programs. They're pretty robust. The city of Hudson has one. It's $500,000. There's a bit of pre-application legwork you have to do where you actually solicit people who might be interested in the program. So this would be something that we would apply for this year or next year, but I know this is something that Supervisor is very interested in. Those are the big ones that we're looking at. I think our real big event is going to be probably in October. We're going to have another housing forum. Since there was one last year and since we have the housing task force, I mean, an annual housing forum might not be a bad idea. We're looking at October just because September got really cluttered. There's only so much attention that people can give to certain topics. So September got packed up. Holidays are coming fairly soon. So hopefully October. One of the things we'd like to do is talk to quite a few developers leading up to that. Just ask them, what are your big barriers? What can we do to kind of incentivize you coming in here? And then I think the other big thing, and I'll circulate this just in case people can't make the meeting. I've been working on kind of a summary and an explainer of exactly what Governor Hochul's executive orders mean to us here in Columbia County. It's not a lot on the face of it, but if that's something that I'll be presenting this Wednesday, but I'll make sure I circulate that just so Grace got a copy of it.
Chris, how would a land bank contribute to solving this problem?
A lot of the land banks in the state already are. So most of them in New York were created. 2011 is when the enabling legislation was authorized or was signed. So the first batch of land banks in the state were really created to address the housing crisis of 2008, 2009, the disinvestment that you got as a result of that. So a lot of those land banks were dealing more urban areas, far more dense areas than most of Columbia County. These are your Albany's, your Troy's, your Syracuse. Since then, more rural land banks have popped up. Essex County is the most recent one. We've had them. Hamilton County's got one. There are quite a few of them that are popping up. Livingston County has one. Their population density almost exactly their population density and their total population almost exactly matches Columbia County. It's really odd. So more rural ones have been popping up that aren't really dealing with the foreclosure crisis per se. They're dealing with what they call underutilized lots. So these are lots that might not have public infrastructure. They're just difficult lots to build on, or lots that have a really complicated ownership history. And there are a few powers that land banks are granted by the state that can help clear those up. But even some of the older land banks, Kingston, what their initial objective was getting just properties back on the tax rolls. They were hit really hard by the housing crisis in 2008. And then they got hit just as hard, if not harder, by the kind of gentrification crisis of the past couple of years. So their land bank has fully pivoted to just doing affordable housing work, still getting foreclosures back on the tax rolls, but affordable housing is their main objective. So the big piece that land banks offer to that is one of the big ticket prices especially for nonprofit developer, which is what most affordable housing developers are, just land acquisition. It's an incredibly high price tag, especially in areas that have hot housing markets, which we still do. So land banks can help offset that initial cost. So it's just a deeper subsidy off the top. And then land banks can also work with the communities themselves to decide, hey, what do you want these parcels to be, instead of those parcels just being built by whoever happens to purchase them.
So the land bank purchases parcels?
They can purchase parcels, they can have them donated by private donors, they can have them transferred into their inventory from the county through the foreclosure process.
Accumulate parcels and then distribute them to developers?
Yep, work with developers. I was a director of operations for the Troy Community Land Bank. We did a number of joint venture development projects with Habitat for Humanity. There's an AbeWorks partner in Troy called TRIP, it's the Troy Residential.
Where does the money come from for a land bank?
Mostly from the state. So there's quite a bit of money in the state coffers for land banks specifically. This year, there's still about 24 million left. There was 50 million at the beginning of the year. There's another 10 million next year.
How does a land bank get that money?
You have to apply for it. So there's two applications. You send in an application to to HCR to create a land bank, which comes with an initial round of operational money. You get a stipend each year for the first 3 years. It varies depending on how large your land bank may be. And then there's another pot of money each year that is just the funding. So you've got the application round to create, and then you have another round each year to draw down more funds.
And you work with developers to actually construct the affordable housing.
Yeah, land banks don't really do development on their own, and they're not really set up for long-term ownership either. They do have the ability to lease property, but really what they're meant to do is just act as kind of a staging area almost. A lot of properties, most properties that go into land bank inventories go through the foreclosure process, and there's a lot that people don't know about those properties. Most counties, and Columbia County does this, and most foreclosing governmental units do this. They sell those properties as is. So if someone's buying a property from the foreclosure list, they don't know what's in it until they walk into the building if they're building up. So land banks can kind of play that sort of middleman role.
It basically takes them off the market to give you the opportunity to see if you can find someone who will accept the restrictions on the use of the property on the subsequent sale to be able to promote affordable housing or other community benefits.
So
Can the land bank go in with contractors and help clean them up and do some types of not remediation?
There's some remediation.
Yeah, sometimes.
Demolition.
You know,
it's a-
right. I mean, I've seen a lot of foreclosures that we look at and you go, well, if somebody wants to buy that and flip it real quick, you could make some good money, but you have to invest some time and work,
Sullivan County just got a $2 million grant.
Yeah,
And land trusts don't qualify for this money?
No,
Maybe you could give
community
the,
land trusts are just
Maybe
like,
use the vernacular so we understand the difference.
so a land trust is, Columbia Land Conservancy is a land trust. So that's an organization that holds land specifically for conservancy to not be used, it's just set aside. Community land trusts are nonprofits that hold land in perpetuity, but then sell off improvements on it, right? So the community land trust would own a yard or an acre, and the building that's on it typically is an affordable home. But the homeowner owns that building, and the community land trust's ownership of the land creates this interest in it that allows them to sell that building again to another affordable home buyer. So that subsidy loops back and back. So that's a community land trust. So they're talking about holding land in perpetuity and creating affordable housing or whatever it happens to be on that land. Land banks are nonprofits, but they're also public authorities. So a lot of that's why you have to apply to create one. Most nonprofits are just, it's $80 and a couple of your friends for board of directors, right? You get a sign up from the state secretary of state, you're good to go. Land banks, you have to ask to create one. The powers that come with being a land bank supersede a lot of traditional nonprofit powers.
The other thing that interests me I'd like to continue to learn more about this. And 10 years ago or more, we brought in Albany Land Bank and we looked at doing the land bank. And at that time, I thought the county was doing a good job with the foreclosure, but our foreclosure process is probably going to change dramatically depending on, because of the Supreme Court action and the legislation that's going to be proposed by the state in the next year or so. I think that's going to change. And I think that having a land bank as a 501c within the county that the board of supervisors has developed and worked with may be an agency that can help do foreclosures. And I don't know, Chris, am I wrong on that? I mean, I'm wondering, and is that an avenue that could help the county do that?
Yeah, actually processing the foreclosures
Right.
themselves. That I'm not sure of. I'm a little dubious of that.
Okay.
Just because land banks would then be on both sides of foreclosures going into the county and coming out of the county. They'd be on both sides of that transaction.
It's
I
like a
think
real,
it's exciting for the county to look at it as it's a tool in your toolbox in establishing sort of, okay, we're thinking about
Right.
asking those questions. Well, what does that really mean if it is a tool in our toolbox? How do we do it? What's the process? And so all those good questions are there, but it's a tool.
I think many of us you've been around, we've seen a lot of directed sales over the years where somebody felt there was a purpose for that. And I think a land bank could certainly serve as that vehicle to, if there was community interest in doing something with a particular property, it goes to the land bank,
the nice thing is that it's set up by the board of supervisors. You can have 5 to 15 members of the board. They serve 3-year terms and they're replaced by the board of supervisors. At the same time, you have the ability to go to a town and look at the list of the 20 properties that are, because foreclosure is only one way, as Chris said, to acquire property.
Right.
But if it is a foreclosure, you go and you talk to the supervisor in that town and say, you know, you see any purpose, what's the highest and best use of this piece of property in terms of the town's policies and objectives and goals? And if they say, well, it would be a great community center, well, the land bank can take it and acquire
The
it
developer does that, right?
for the community center. They could do it for housing, or the supervisor could say, I'd rather see the two landowners adjoining buy it and expand their property. And then, you know, the property can't be transferred from a foreclosure list to the land bank without a vote by the Board of Supervisors.
Nope.
And, you know, the other question is, you know, would the land bank, depending on what they say about the Supreme Court, where the premium on the sales now is going to have to be given back to the owner, presumably, or the defaulting owner. You know, would it make sense for the county to at least have the land bank pay them for the back taxes and the penalties rather than get it for $1? But there might be a case where the town would say, we'd rather have the county give it to them for $1, similar to what you've done with expanding land at waste treatment or waste
Commerce Park.
the Commerce Park, or waste transfer stations, or cell towers. So it's a vehicle that could be as active as demand enables, but it also, if we don't look at it and make a determination if it's something that works for us, they're going to run out of them, and you may not be able to get into the.
Run out of land banks.
Yeah, there's only
Yeah.
6 licenses left.
But I think 7 next year.
Yeah,
Really?
and they can authorize more,
Yeah.
but you know that means.
Might as well try to get 3 of them.
Well, and the other people who have them aren't going to be in favor of betting more, because the
Right.
pot of money that's going to be distributed.
It just makes it a lot more
Right.
competitive.
Yes.
I think the concern is what's the impact on home rule?
Yep.
And what is, you know, if someone doesn't do what they agreed to do after you transfer it to them, there are reverter clauses in the deed that would enable the land bank to take the property back. We did discuss, you know, how easy is that, but there is the legal ability to do it.
I did it once. It wasn't that hard.
And there's been a lot of properties that I've seen on our foreclosure list where the supervisors, they asked, could we put some type of deed restriction on there? And the answer always was, we have no vehicle to do anything with it. You know,
Here you
where a
go.
land bank could have that.
And the other thing is,
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah,
not
the land
gonna,
bank ones always come with that.
if you're not in the business of holding land, and there'd be no intent to do that after a period of time, you basically put it back on the market and sell it for
Yeah.
fair market value. It's kind of gives the county the ability to, and the towns, the ability to do what the county did with 11 Warren Street by engaging us to get the property under contract, hold it till you decided what you wanted to do with it, and then release it.
So what are the chances that we would get a land bank?
Well, I think Supervisor, you had some thoughts on what the next steps are.
So, yeah, I wanted to gather some more information, really. You know, I'd like to have more of us get more informed on this. We thought about bringing in a guest. I don't know, you had mentioned a guest, or Chris you had talked to somebody that, you know, could help us give some more of these answers. Maybe somebody that's you've done land banks, you know, you have. But
Chris has a lot of knowledge on it, but I do think it's useful to either hear, you had suggested someone from a smaller county that already has
I
one.
think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Adam
Where I was
has
going,
ranked us
somebody-
before,
And
but that's all.
Attorney.
Perhaps an attorney who could, you know,
Yeah.
answer some of the questions.
But I was thinking if there are 7 left,
Our thought would be if you could consider, since this committee doesn't meet except for every other month, if we could have it could be by Zoom because it could be an informational meeting, but if we could have an informational meeting so that perhaps you could make a decision one way or the other by the September Board of Supervisors meeting.
It might be easier to obtain some professional
Yeah.
opinions too.
It's cheaper than
Right.
driving them down there.
Exactly.
yeah.
yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any downside in going ahead and applying like tomorrow. What happens if we decide we want to do something quickly?
And don't exercise our
And then,
rights.
and then we discovered that for some reason it doesn't make any sense. We can always give it back, I guess, right?
Yeah, the nice thing about land banks is if the land bank itself decides to dissolve, which if it's the county board of supervisors appointed land bank, if you guys want to dissolve.
But it sounds to me like this is a scarce commodity. If we screw around too long, we're gonna miss the opportunity.
Right,
We
like
keep
applying
everything.
now would be preserving the option that's there.
Right.
Is that your thought?
I think there's still some questions that we need to
Yeah.
get answered, but I don't
Yeah.
disagree. We should do it sooner than waiting till September, and then have us at the October board meeting.
The act of just applying to become a land bank requires a resolution from the foreclosing governmental unit. So
Okay,
that would be the purpose of this.
yeah. Right.
We have it almost completed if you wanted to use it, but we just need to.
But if we could pull something together in, August, just, an informational thing, and we can invite all of the do it through this committee, but invite all the supervisors, so more people are informed,
Sure.
and then,
Just circulate something to the supervisors that outline the
right.
logic of doing this.
So I know that Mike was working on that, or Chris was
Yeah.
working on that.
Well, I talked to the chairman and, indicated, I think since we had the guy here 7 or 8 years ago, things have changed. And, I think that with the right set of bylaws and the right set of approved policies and procedures, you can control it from becoming, where the town loses, an individual town loses its ability to, the lead bankers can't ride herd on what happens in your
Well, the
town.
land bank can't violate town zoning.
No.
No,
So the town zoning still governs.
right.
Those are some of the questions, I think, that if everyone can hear them at the same time in the same room,
Yeah.
that,
Is there, Chris, is there an example of, bylaws that some other municipality has used or you've seen used before? Like a template, that we could present so that it's almost like an example of if we did this, these would be the rules,
yeah, we've looked at several.
maybe we write something up,
The other thing we saw was, they also have policies and procedures that the board, votes on so that, people don't think you can come in and every deal's a one-off.
Yeah. I mean, I just can't imagine what the downside is. We had this thing.
What's the land conservancy think about these land banks?
But it's interesting because, we work very closely with, Troy, Dean at the, conservatory, as we did with Peter Hayden. And, they're looking at now, can they take land for conservation, but take the first 300 feet along the road and turn it into housing?
So I wonder.
But they would not be able to take property from a foreclosure sale unless they bought it.
Right.
What we actually talked to them about was setting up a fund where we could use some of the CEDC loan money that, would enable them to come and buy a piece of property at a tax sale if they thought it would either be advantageous. And what they told me is they don't use their operating capital to buy properties if they have to. They finance it. So I think between Habitat, the Land Bank, the Land Conservancy, and the land trust, the community land trust that the city of Hudson is setting up with the hope of being able to serve beyond the city's boundaries, and Chris has been working with Michelle on that. I think you're going to have a team effort, and from our discussions with the Land Conservancy, I think they would see a land bank as option.
And I know there's administrative costs, overhead to these operations, and we spoke about that.
I think what we would recommend there for the beginning is, just as the county IDA contracts with CEDC for services, and the state through your initial grant provides the money because I think when people see, well, the Troy Land Bank has a budget of what, $300,000?
Something like
Yeah,
that.
our assurance to you is there would be no appropriation required to run the land bank.
I know it did make me nervous when I heard that Albany County funded theirs to the tune of $2 million a year with tax dollars. Well, that was years ago, but they do some different things.
Well, they've got blight that they really have to.
Yeah, and that was where I saw them being an advantage in the city of Hudson. You could see them correcting blight.
Right.
I think there is a different path that Chris has brought to us today to how they could be utilized in rural communities like ours a little bit. Not every house,
And I
not
think
every.
and that's what came up the last time, because as many of you know, the city of Hudson does their own foreclosures.
Yeah.
But you could ultimately work with them after you got established to do an intermunicipal land bank.
Mhm.
one last question. I ask this of my housing committee every month. That is, how many affordable houses do we envision needing over the next period of time?
Well, it's an interesting question, right? Because if you create enough where you help solve your own demand, you'll need to create more for all the people who want to move here because their towns are much more affordable than your area now. So it's kind of a question without an answer, right? It's the situation that we run into with traffic. It's, well, build more roads, but there's a paradox every time you build more roads.
Well,
So this part is-
And I think the other part
If you build
here,
it, they will come.
Right.
the other part here is the affordability, is an issue of not allowing people to go to the next step so that people can backfill at an affordable level from the apartment. So if you have a $300,000 house, you have nowhere to go. You're gonna stay there.
Yeah.
Because you can't afford a $400,000 house.
And Bob Gibson has told us that any housing in Columbia County actually helps his situation. You know, I mean,
Well, it takes the pressure off the lower end.
right, someplace,
if
you
you have
know,
people
it
move
opens up.
I think I would guess 1,200 units.
Countywide?
Countywide.
Yeah, we have 100 homeless people now, as far as I understand from what. Dave
80
Harrison
or something,
told us.
and we're at,
Yeah,
like,
Homeless or emergency shelter.
Yeah. So clearly there's that need.
But see, that
Question
need,
there is, how do they afford any kind of housing?
that need is really gotta be driven by government social service at the
Right.
state level. And, hopefully as they, overcome the challenges that resulted in them, being in that position,
Right.
whether it was mental health, whether it was lack of employment, lack of skills, that then they could get into a pipeline that ultimately would get them.
And do we envision affordable housing being rental or purchase or both?
It's gotta be a mix.
The big issue is we only have 6 sewer districts. So if it's going to be multi-unit rental, you can't put more than 4 or 6 units on a septic field.
Yeah.
And I think that,
And Ron doesn't have enough power.
Right, we got a developer up there, we're ready to do 70 new mobile homes, and they're doing all the water and sewer infrastructure on their dime,
That's
and the
terrific.
National Grid can't bring them enough electricity to turn them on, you know, so
Right.
I can't sell them.
and they're working at the highest level at grid.
Right, they've actually had a year.
Sounds like you need a solar field.
That really riled.
Wait till we raise the pilot.
Wow.
Well, and I think the other thing too is,
But you need infrastructure, in other words, you got a solar field or not.
Chris is
Can't
working
get
on,
power and can't get power back out either.
he's working on, the
And the neighbors. are-
understanding the governor's proposal, which has no details yet, but if you're going to have a priority or extra points in getting state funding for housing, if you're a pro-housing community,
Right.
We have to be able to figure out, how you do that in communities that don't have any water, sewer, gas, electric, and broadband.
It's gonna be a different picture than it is in larger
Suburbia.
municipality, but,
Yeah, and I keep hearing from my fire company that we need to do this on a town by town basis so that we can attract young firefighter aged men and women.
Would live very. long.
Otherwise, yes, you live locally, otherwise.
and it goes with every trade. I mean,
Yeah.
every trade, every job that you talk to has got the same problem. I can't afford to buy a house and live in Columbia County.
And if you do, and you have,
Chris is still struggling.
and if you have to commute to, Albany to get the job that allows you to pay for it, you're
Right.
gonna be around during the day to,
Be a
park the
volunteer.
truck.
Yeah, it's,
That's changing. That's just is what it is.
Well,
So, yeah, why don't you two guys try and
it's one
put
tool in
together.
a toolkit. If we could coordinate, with, chairman of this committee and yourself,
Yeah.
to get a date, get hold of Supervisor Stoda and,
Let's plan to do something remotely and see if we can bring on somebody to talk.
and I'm sure that if we, had a consensus, that we could meet a half an hour, special committee meeting before the, board meeting, if we could expedite it.
I'm definitely interested in learning more about it.
I just didn't want to bring out a resolution to do this today without having answered some more questions.
I think there's some supervisors who still have some, and many are sitting here.
And this is a good conversation. I mean, Chris is, but it's just Brenda and I that are on the
Oh, yeah, thank you.
committee and, been listening to Chris and, but
It makes sense, but I think people have to understand the ability to control it through the board, which is appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and also what the statutory limitations are.
And I think, Chris, correct me, and we're meeting again this Wednesday, but I mean, I think the task force has been all about making a recommendation for this, but, and, you know,
Yeah, I wouldn't.
we didn't formally do
No,
that,
yeah, we
but-
haven't we don't really have a process for that.
I know, but I mean, the task force could and should make a recommendation to the full board of supervisors that we consider this and, you know, move it that way, too, you know, so.
Yeah, I think the two co-chairs
Yeah,
would draft
we
something.
can do that, so, you know.
And also, I think then you get it, now you can move on from talking about it. And if you do it and you're able to be successful and it doesn't work, you'll find that out. And sometimes, you know, failure gets you to the next level of success.
At least you understand a little bit more about it.
And if it doesn't work out, you get to keep all the properties, which is really kind of the best part of it. And the grant writing.
Well, and unless,
If you capture $1 million of state funding to help it work, you know.
and now if you sold it for 80 and you have to give back 60 to the owner because of the Supreme Court case.
Right.
And we buy it for 20 and sell it for 80, maybe, where does that 60 go? In the land bank.
Another vehicle.
But we appreciate the conversation, and I know, you know, Chris has been here, well, the end of last month, or the end of this month, it's 6 months. And I want to really compliment him on, you know, the knowledge and experience that he brings to the position and the conversation and engagement that he's made with the supervisors as well as many of the stakeholders out in the community. And one final point on Jessica's report. I don't know that you went through this, but before you do, we say it's the annual report because we say June to May. And that's because we started this in June, even though you funded us with ARPA money for the whole year. So I have 6 months of ARPA money in a deferred revenue account at CEDC, so that the 3-year program will run from June of 2022 through May of 2025, rather than us ending up with a 3-year 23, 24, 25 program that actually it'll run to May of 26. But I didn't, when it was required under the ARPA funding that they give us the first year all at once, but we hadn't started the program because it hadn't yet been formally approved. So I'm holding those funds and we'll use them in the last 6 months of the program on a 36-month basis. And finally, we did, I think you're all aware, we did sign the purchase and sale contract with Galvin for 11 Warren. It became a public discussion when it was presented to the Public Works Committee last week, and they began the initial seeker approval process. And the due diligence is continuing. Ray Jakowski has been coordinating that. The survey is done. They're working on the environmental, and they're doing the title report. So our board meets tomorrow. We're not really ready, I don't think, to approve the transfer until you would approve it.
So how's that becoming for us in our August meeting?
Yeah, and our August meeting is the 29th. So, you know, by September 1st, assuming the county still hasn't identified any due diligence issues or other reason not to move forward, we could be in a position to get that done. Yeah. Anything in this? It's pretty self-explanatory.
I have a question. What's going on with Flanders?
Flanders, we've been in touch with their controller. Obviously, the controller of the parent company sees this as a fly on the front of the elephant. I have sent two businesses that have inquired about it to them. And the difficulty is that the Flanders does not own that building. It's under a 30-year lease with a company that owns warehouses for major companies that, they buy them and then to leverage their balance sheet, they sell them back. The question becomes, one of the people looking at it only wanted it if they could buy it. And if you're the owner and you have Flanders with a AAA credit rating on the lease, it could stay empty for the next 22 years. And, Flanders they're not going to stop paying. So, either Flanders is going to be looking for someone to sublease it, or they're going to have to go to this PJ Clark holding company and try to break the lease with Flanders' consent to get out from under the liability, which is possible. The question becomes, what do they put in there? And does it create 60 or 70 or 80 jobs? Or is it some type of use that is not labor intensive? So
Maybe that could be housing.
that's hard, I think, but look, I think,
I don't know why it's hard.
well,
You have to knock that building down.
Why?
You can't, there's no windows in that thing, is there?
it's all metal.
It's an industrial factory, right?
Yeah.
And
And there's still tenants in the building, so.
There's some offices.
Yeah, there's some, Crawford Associates is there, but small space, but yeah, I think that, I always wanted to see if the state, and Gus used to be responsible for this, so I'm careful here. If the state, if you go where Flanders is and come closer to the city, there's like 6 or 8 houses on Fourth Avenue there where many of them have been restored or renovated. And then there's the big field behind the state's gate. I mean, I guess the bigger issue is what happens with the prison long-term, which is always a concern. But, that area, but in the city, it's not as much of an issue because you have the 11 acres behind the Galvin field on Hudson Avenue that developers have looked at for housing. But again, how do you get it to be affordable housing versus, upscale luxury housing?
Hudson has quite an extensive list of housing being proposed right now, and I don't know how much of it's going
Yeah,
to happen.
Galvin's
But,
not, he hasn't done a thing yet.
They're about to close on the affordable housing, not the low income. They're waiting for the state to award them tax credits, but the IDA has been notified and documents are being prepared.
You mean the one that is the
The
big
one-
units?
Yeah.
708.
708, one's across the street from, so I think that, again, we have to have a strategy for places where there's only septic and wells, and a place where you have a well, where you have public water and no septic, or septic with no public water, and then highlight the areas around the 6 sewer districts and try to position ourselves with some of the data that the state's looking for to become a certified pro-housing community, which includes, how would you suggest we get data on the last 5 years of building permits in each of your towns? I mean, where do we start? I mean, I don't think it's automated. Might be on an Excel
No,
spreadsheet.
many of us have, software for the building inspector that they can run a report pretty easy.
Yeah. Is that the first thing, is it 5 years of building permit data?
Maybe at the village of Kinderhook.
Yeah.
I don't believe that you're required to keep them for that long. Like,
Well, it's on the computer.
No, if it's on the
If you have it on the
software.
computer, that's okay.
Nobody dumps the computer.
I mean, how accurate it is the next question.
But I think we would want to go through the supervisors.
Sure, yeah,
to
reach out to
talk to the
every-
building departments. We won't go directly to.
Oh, and brownfields.
Oh, yeah, the brownfield.
Yes, I was gonna ask you that, yeah.
So that's the last topic. We've had very initial conversations with Greene County. They were interested in applying for EPA brownfield program,
Mhm.
which is basically, it's an assessment program where EPA provides funding to communities for planning, inventorying the sites, looking at what's needed to really prepare. It's sort of that initial step. In brownfield just being any site that is contaminated or potentially has been thought that it's contaminated. So I had sent her out an email a couple weeks ago. If anyone has questions or want to talk about it, really what we're looking to do is start to compile a list of sites that are or may be considered contaminated so that we can begin to say, do we have an application, a competitive application? We're actually meeting tomorrow. Greene County is bringing in a consultant, an expert in the brownfield program and the PPA grant program. So we're just going to really learn about what is it, what are our opportunities, and how do we put together, if we're interested, how do we put together a competitive application?
And we understand that, they prefer applications that have multiple communities, and Greene County had applied and, did not get the grant on the last round because they weren't partnered with another community.
So they're looking at called coalition.
So I did want to ask you, when you sent that out, I mean, you know, Stuyvesant has an old factory that is right now in the middle of foreclosure. I've talked to Mike about it, and it has already been identified. Have you done some remediation work there in the past through DEC or EPA or somebody? Is that a site you want to know about, or is that, or somebody already knows about it because of the EPA work that's already been done there?
And Jim Beecher called.
Yeah.
I'll get you that.
Okay.
But Matt Morrell had identified a site, and so, and Kippy,
Like, yeah.
Yeah, any site that I don't want to lose track of a site. It's not
Okay,
really that there's a database we can pull from.
Also,
or
you know,
anything
if it
like-
already, if you were looking for ones that hadn't been identified by DEC.
Yes,
or-
anything.
Okay.
So like so state DEC, there are designated brownfield. We only have one or two in the county. This is separate from that.
Okay.
This is really to look at, are there sites that do have contamination or potential contamination, and what's
So
the
apparently
efforts
this
that
one
we're-
does, but I mean, I know that they've done some work there. So
I'm going to make sure that's on the list.
Yeah.
The final thing is that, Don Nelson's contacted me with Jolene about, CEDC serving as the fiscal agent for, the upcoming climate carnival.
Yep.
The Land Conservancy had done it in the past, but, had asked to be relieved of that duty. Basically, we would enter into an agreement, with the county, whereby we would, we would receive any money that they collect. We'd hold it in a separate bank account. We would issue checks to anyone they tell us, needs to be paid as a vendor, or for services, in connection with it. And at the end of the year, we would, net out the books and records, turn over the money that was left to the county, and move on.
So you'd be the fiduciary, basically.
And that, because we're a 501c3, if someone wanted to, donate money towards it, as a sponsor, they could get the tax benefit, which they can't get if they give it to the county.
Like, yeah, on the kind of fairgrounds.
Yeah, like the climate carnival we
We
had
need
there
us
last year.
to approve this, or can we just go ahead and do it?
We don't have a resolution. We have to get an agreement signed, but I know that, Rob was working on that with Don. I don't want to get ahead of that process.
So hopefully that'll come to the board.
Yeah.
In August.
Land Conservancy had done it previously.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I think Peter,
I thought it was a good job for them, but then they didn't want to do it.
and we're gonna do it for free because you're already paying us. Okay, yeah, they would, I think they said 5% or whatever. But, that's not really free, right? If you're already paying us. Yep. I like to misspeak once in a while, but get your reaction.
At no extra cost.
Yeah. No addition.
So there's another resolution for,
Yep,
so the
I do
one.
have
Okay.
a resolution here, appointing, someone to the,
There was some,
Workforce.
okay, so I have two. So there was also an authorization to hold a public hearing, right? So that was the,
we did that one.
so then.
But this
why is there
resolution is
two?
to,
And we did that at the beginning.
Right, but there was, she's got a different, oh, she's got it worded differently.
I've got this one here.
Okay, all right, so there's that one, but I thought, okay, she's got it here twice. That's why I'm confused. All right,
So this
sorry.
resolution says the Columbia Green Workforce Development Board is requesting the appointment of Miss Arcia Cooper, owner of Erica's Insurance, to serve as Columbia County Business Representative from appointment from June 30th, 24, replacing Christina, somebody or other, Key Bank.
I'll move it. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And you approved several, a year or so ago, Jessica to be CEDC's representative.
Great.
Forward to meeting.
That has no department head signature. I don't know who's the.
You've got
department head
to,
for
I
that
think
is.
you, oh,
I signed it as
oh, right there. Okay.
committee chair.
All right.
Department.
Yeah, that comes from.
It comes
workforce.
from Workforce
Yeah.
Development Board or Chamber of Commerce. Anybody else have anything to bring to, economic development committee? We thank you to the staff from CEDC.
Thank you.
Enlightening us. We'll pursue that action. Anybody on here? Did Brenda ever get on?
No, Brenda did not get on.
Don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Do you want to talk about the, what do you call it, grant, the USDA crop damage thing?
Well, only that we were included in it.
You need to get that out. Dave Harrison was asking how do we got that around?
Jessica was gonna send it out, in our newsletter or in
Yeah,
a separate email.
coordinate with the chamber.
And with, Todd Erling.
Yeah.
He's got the list of. What were you? I just did everything the USDA did.
Oh, right. You didn't get it.
I got it from the Farm Bureau.
Okay. I got
The
it.
information and
The
did the post
information
it,
you were.
Yeah.
the announcement that I put
Yes.
out.
Trying to make sure it gets out.
You didn't think I got a big on that too, right?
What is it,
Frost damage earlier.
slash CDC? What's
Schumer
going on
called me.
here? What's happening here?
Schumer called you. He asked you better.
Did you want to
I had
share?
no data. Not that much.
Did you want to share that with everybody or no?
Um,
Got better graphics.
Peaches we're getting her from Pennsylvania.
Pretty loud.
I mean, like, we're buying them.
Yeah, what? Do we have to adjourn? Yes, soon, but he's got one more thing.
Lisa
Yeah.
Kalina,
We
just wanted
do.
to send a note that she had, some family things going on tonight, couldn't make it, but she thanks everybody for their support in the kind of differently program that they're involved in, so that they presented to, Health and Human Services Committee the other. So we thanks everybody for their support, and so see everybody at the fair. If nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion. I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.